You may have heard me talking a lot lately about goal writing and how I prefer to write my goals in rubric format. And maybe you've even joined my rubric reset workshop, which is such a mouthful to say. I struggle every time I say it, but maybe you came to my live workshop or caught the replay. But if you didn't, I want to talk a little bit about what rubrics are in this context and how and why I think they are the best thing for writing goals for autistic students. So, for many years, I told myself that I was a bad goal writer. Actually, up until very recently, I still believed that because I knew that goal writing just didn't come naturally to me the way that it seemed to for others. But nowadays, I kind of realize that that may have not ever been the case either. I think most of us struggle with goal writing. It's not an easy thing to do. And so maybe other people were just better at getting it done or pretending like they weren't having a hard time with it. But I always believed that I was kind of the odd person out who struggled with goal writing, really wasn't good at it, and I kind of avoided it, if I'm honest, because when something's really hard like that, who wants to do it, right? So for a number of years, I kind of just struggled through it. It took me forever to write my goals, and I've talked about this a lot. So if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, or you've heard other episodes, you've heard me talk about this. I struggled through my goals in a major way for many, many years. And so I would sit there, I would be looking all over Google, trying to find goal banks that might capture what I wanted to work on with my students. But what I found was that the goal banks that existed online and the things that I had seen over the years really weren't aligned with what I was working on with my students, because I was working with autistic students with moderate to high support needs, and I just felt like the goals that I was coming across didn't reflect their needs. And I also really didn't understand some of the criteria that we were using to track data and measure progress. So that coupled together made for a very challenging thing for me. I really struggled. And I feel like I can't emphasize that enough. I struggled with goals. And I just had this mentality that, listen, I'm a great therapist. I am good with the kids. I know what I'm doing, but I can't write a goal to save my life. And that's okay. We can't all be good at everything. But long story short, I ended up kind of going to one of my mentors and venting and saying, I can't do this for every IEP. I cannot be sitting here for hours trying to recreate the wheel every single IEP. It's killing me. And she said, well, why don't you think about using a rubric-based goal? Now, at the time, I had no idea what that meant. The only time I had used or heard the word rubric was in the context of in high school or college when a teacher would give you the rubric for an assignment ahead of time so that you knew what you were going to be measured based on. And so I kind of had that in mind. And that's pretty much what rubric-based goals are. But there are so many reasons why I have grown to love this approach to goal writing, and frankly, why it's the only way that I write goals to this day. So even up until recently, I was still telling myself that story that I was a bad goal writer because I felt like rubric goals were the easy way out. Like, I couldn't write those really smart goals. I couldn't write those, highly technical goals that I had heard and seen other people write because I didn't understand them, right? This is what I was telling myself. But I could write a rubric goal in 2 seconds, right? I knew exactly what to do once I had learned this system and really refined it over my career. But for some reason, I still had this block where I thought that rubric goals were kind of like a cheat code or like an easy way out that didn't count. And it wasn't until I started hiring in my clinic and realizing that I was in charge of a team and I needed to support them across all aspects of this job that I realized that, well, they might have questions with how I write my goals here for our clients and how we, move from start to finish for when a client comes on board at our clinic, and how we assess them and evaluate them, and how we write their goals, and how we track progress. So I realized that I needed to get a little bit more clear on what I was doing when I was writing my rubric goals. And as it turns out, that was very easy. I was able to sit down and basically say, okay, when I sit down to write a rubric, what am I doing? What is the process? And I ended up being able to break it down into a few steps to writing what I refer to now as aligned rubrics. Now, the reason I call them aligned rubrics is because they align with my values, with the child-led approach, with neuroaffirming supports, right? And so when I was hiring for my clinic, I wanted to be able to teach the other therapists this process. So I wrote the aligned rubric framework mainly for my clinic, and then I held a training for my therapists. And I have a very small team. They are amazing, but I don't have like some large team with tons of different departments or anything. I mean, it's a very small business. There are maybe 5 of us total. And so I had this meeting and I said, I want to run something by you. I want to show you how I write goals, and I want to see if it resonates with you before I, take this public, right? Because as somebody with a social media platform and a podcast and, somebody who hosts events and creates digital products, I never want to create something or do something until I know for a fact it's going to be helpful for you, or until I know for a fact that it's valuable and it's tried and true. Like, I will never create something and sell it or, present it if I don't use it myself or I don't actually see the value in it. That's just not my nature. It's also not my value system. So I wanted to use our team meeting to kind of see what other therapists would say about this approach. And after that meeting, I was like on cloud 9 because my therapists loved it. They were like, wait, why was I never taught this in school? Why have we not been doing this all along? This is really, really simple, but really clear. And it makes perfect sense for our autistic students, especially those who are just kind of emerging with their communication or who are multimodal communicators. It makes sense. And so that feedback really gave me the confidence to package this approach into a full system, which, like I said, I now call the aligned rubric framework. Now, this system is a digital download that's, I don't even remember how many pages it is, but it's pretty chunky. It's a chunky thing because I wanted to go into detail on the process of what a rubric is, why they're important, and how to actually build your own. I think what would have been easier probably for me and for others would have been for me to just write a goal bank with just, 100 goals. And I'm not saying that wouldn't have been useful and valuable. It would have been. And you do get some example goals, a lot of them actually in the framework. But I wanted to give you the knowledge and the insight to be able to understand the process, to be able to realize why rubric goals are so good, and not only for your own knowledge, but to be able to explain them to other people on your team, mainly to admin, to supervisors, to families, right? To be able to explain your goal and why you've written it in a specific way is like gold, right? Because what we do when we write goals is we kind of set the tone for how we're going to show up for our students. And so when we write a good goal, it makes things a lot more seamless, right? When we write a goal that's not so good, it kind of makes things clunky, and it makes it hard for us to show up in a child-led way when our goal doesn't really reflect those values and that approach, right? So I wanted to explain the entire process. So I put together this framework. We iterated it multiple times. I had my team critique it, give feedback, cross things out. I mean, I have copies of this thing just like laying around the office probably at this point with everybody's handwriting on it. Our whiteboard in the office, just chicken scratch of notes of things that I was writing, questions that I had about it. So this is not something that I put together overnight. It's something that I really put a ton of thought into, and actually like 10 years into. I mean, not for nothing, but it did take me over 10 years to create this. So why am I telling you this? Well, first of all, I want you to know that it exists. I want you to know that there is a system that we are finding really easy to use and valuable. And I want to challenge a few of the mindset blocks that I know I had for a long time, and maybe you have as well. And I think that if we work through some of these mindset shifts, then maybe you'll be able to see goal writing in a new light and ultimately see yourself as a clinician or an educator in a new light. And that is bigger than anything I could teach, I think, bigger than any resource I could create, because when our mindset is aligned with our values, with what we want to be doing in our career and how we want to show up for our students, then we're unstoppable. And I used to think, probably a couple years back at this point, but I used to think that when people talked about mindset, they were just so out of touch with the reality of that like hustle culture, right? So many of us as clinicians and educators, we're just used to being run into the ground with schedules that allow for no room to breathe, let alone go to the bathroom or think, right? And so many of us have just gotten used to that really fast-paced kind of environment. So when I heard people who I knew were, way beyond me in terms of running a business or their career, maybe they had many years on me, and they would talk about mindset, I would think, easy for you to say, right? Like that's easy for you. That's convenient for you to say because you're not the one who's out here seeing kids all day. I'm tired. I don't have time to work on my mindset. And I thought it was kind of like fluff, or, sometimes I'll call it woo or woo-woo, right? I thought it was just something that people who were far removed from the actual work would say. And I thought this for a lot of years until one day I read a book. It's called The 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. If you have not read that book, I'm going to link it in the show notes because I genuinely think it changed a lot of things for me. And one of those things was the idea that mindset is huge and it can really and genuinely make huge impacts on our life when we consider how we are thinking about the things we're going through. And so I want to tie this back into our goal writing because I think that from the response I've gotten since doing my workshop and releasing this digital download and talking about goal writing on social media and on the podcast, I know I'm not alone in that feeling of I just suck at goal writing. Goal writing is just so hard. I do it as quickly as I can and I'm done with it. I move on because I don't really want to even think about it anymore, right? How many times do you complain about or hear others complaining about having to write progress reports, right? The IEP season when you're just kind of churning them out. I mean, it's a lot of work and we are really being overworked and underpaid, in my opinion, but we're not going to go there on this episode, but just know it's always right below the surface here. When I'm advocating, I'm always thinking about our own mental and physical health. But also, I think that so many people have told me, I thought I was a bad writer of goals too. Like I thought that I just would never be able to write good goals for my autistic students. And so I know that this mindset is not something that has only affected me, but maybe it's affected you as well. And so I kind of want to break it down a little bit today, talk about the mindset, and tell you a little bit about the rubric process, just a little bit, because I am going to link in the show notes a quick start guide to rubric writing that's going to teach you the basics and will then share the full product if that's something that you think sounds of value to you. I'll also be hosting the Rubric Reset Workshop. See, there goes that mouthful of a name again. I'll be hosting that live workshop again very soon. So you're going to want to stay in touch. If you're not on my email list, make sure that you sign up, whether by going to my website or by downloading one of my freebies that will get you onto the email list. And you'll be the first people to know when that live workshop is happening again. Okay, so let's talk about the mindset here. The mindset that I think I had for a long time was that I was bad at goal writing, and when I wrote rubrics, they weren't real goals. And I feel like that makes me laugh now because why would I think that? But I just think when you do something so differently from the norm, from what you were taught, it's easy to think that it's not right, right? It's easy to think that you're doing something wrong or that, other people would frown on what you're doing. And so I think I was maybe a little insecure that I was only able to write good goals for my autistic students through this rubric format. And so for a lot of years, I kind of just kept it to myself. I didn't really talk much about it. Of course, if somebody came to me and said, I'm really struggling to come up with a goal for this student, what would you do? I would tell them about the rubric system. But beyond that, it wasn't something that I was really talking about a lot because I still felt like goal writing was this intense, really important thing that I didn't understand. And so if I'm honest, I think I felt kind of silly with my rubrics because I felt like, well, why can't I write a more quote unquote smart goal, or why can't my goals be measured in 80% accuracy? Like, why don't I understand those criteria, that metric system, right? Why do I not get it? And I think that because goal writing was so hard for me for so many years, when I started writing rubrics and they were easy, I felt like I was doing something wrong. Like I felt like I was doing something bad, right? Something that wasn't allowed because why was it so easy? Goal writing was supposed to be hard. It was so important. It can't be this easy. But a recent mentor of mine told me that it's okay for things to feel easy. I'm pausing here because hearing that from somebody that I deeply respect, who has built a business that serves people in such a high level way, kind of took me aback because I'm like, wait, you're not grinding it out day in and day out trying to, like, how did you even get to where you are? You're so successful. You've got all of these accolades. You've helped so many people. You have built a business that is serving so many people in so many amazing ways. And you're telling me that it's okay if I take the easy way out? And it's like, that's not what he said, but that's what my brain heard. My brain was like, no, it can be easy for other people, but not for you. It can't be easy for you because then you would be lazy and you would be cheating. Two things that I am very much averse to hearing and very much like go against my values, right? Like I want to be known for somebody who's honest and reliable and trustworthy, whatever. Somebody who's a hard worker, somebody who puts in the time and effort to achieve things. So for you to tell me that something can be easy and still be right and still be really powerful and valuable, just didn't, my brain couldn't compute that. My brain was like, what do you mean? No, it can't. If you're not sitting at the table crying over your goals, you're not writing them right. Like I just went into like full dad mode at the kitchen table teaching their kid math, right? Algebra. Like let's not even go there because what bad memories, right? But when I kind of took a step back and I thought about it, I'm like, could it be easy? Is it okay for something to be easy if it's working? And the answer is yes. Why would I not lean into something that feels easy? Why would I not lean into something that is valuable for me and has worked really well for my students for so many years? So I thought, okay, that is a mindset shift that I need to work toward, that I need to really consider, because up until this point, I have prided myself on my work ethic and the fact that I do the work. If you see something that I've created, hundreds of hours have gone into it at least, right? I am somebody who works way more than I should, somebody who cares way more than I should. And so nothing about this has ever been easy. It's never felt easy. And if something was easy, well, great, then I'm adding more work to my schedule because it can't be easy. I can't be feeling this sense of ease and peace, right? Especially not about goal writing. But once I took the time to think about what it would be like if I just leaned into this sense of ease, I thought, fine, I'm just going to go for it. And that's what prompted me to then teach my team the system. Their feedback inspired me to really create the full system. And the response that I've gotten both at my summit when I talked about this topic, at my workshop when I've talked about it, with the product itself, through my membership, with my members raving about it, I realized that it's too good to keep to myself. And that's the beauty in all of this, that when we don't see our value, when we don't see our gift and we don't lean into it or honor it or acknowledge it, we actually are, denying or depriving people of the blessings that we could offer them if we just really did go for it. And so if you're listening to this and you're going, okay, this sounds like woo, this is fluff, I encourage you and I challenge you to unpack that a little bit. Because when I started to work on my mindset, I genuinely think that everything felt more aligned, everything felt better. Not just goal writing, but the way that I run my business, the way that I show up for my students and my family and my friends, right? I've been able to really make sense of things and work through some of the blocks that I had put up, probably to protect myself, or at least my brain thought it was protecting itself, but really that weren't serving me anymore. And so one of those mindset shifts has been, let it be easy. It's okay if something's easy. If it's easy, it probably means that you've worked hard enough on it and it's time to experience a little bit of ease with it. And that's how I feel about rubric goal writing. I feel like at this point, the only reason it feels easy and it feels like a cheat code is because I have mastered it. I have taken something that, sparked my interest and really dove in. And while this system is not necessarily something that I'm using for other types of goal writing, maybe I'm not using it for articulation, or I'm not using it for, whatever, insert whatever other population you might be supporting. It works very, very well for autistic students and other kids who are working on language, specifically when they are early communicators, when they are multimodal communicators, when they are non-speaking or using AAC, when they are minimally speaking, when they are GLPs. Like, this kind of goal works very well for those kinds of students. And it also really supports a child-led approach because it's flexible. And it really allows for sessions that let the child lead. And isn't that the whole reason that we're here? Isn't that the whole reason that we are, you're listening to this podcast, I'm sitting here talking about it? So that's my first mindset shift that I think I would encourage you to think about. And the other thing that I want you to remember is that you're not a bad goal writer. The issue is that we were only taught one way. We were taught this 80% accuracy in 8 out of 10 opportunities style goal, and we were forced to apply it to our autistic students' therapy, right? To their education. But what we didn't realize and what we weren't taught is that those kinds of criterion don't actually really reflect progress for our autistic kids, because specifically when we talk about communication can't be accurate or inaccurate. Who am I to judge whether something is accurate or not when it comes from somebody else, right? That's what they chose to say. That's how they chose to say it. That's their prerogative, and that's their communication. Something is not communication if I've made you say it. Okay, I'm going to repeat it. It is not communication if you made the other person say the thing. So if I'm sitting across from my autistic student and I'm saying, tell me more, and they say more, is that really communication? I would argue that maybe it could become communication if, the child saw value in it and it felt, safe and meaningful. But that in and of itself, to me, is not communication. That is a child following a demand. It's a child performing a skill that you've very specifically and explicitly told them to do. And communication is not that. Communication is being able to express your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own wants and needs and desires and interests, right? What upsets you, what you don't like, what you do like. And so if something is not coming from the child in front of us, then is it really communication? I don't know that it is. And so when you think, because I'm sure some of you are still thinking that you're a bad goal writer, when you think that, I want you to remember this podcast. I want you to think to yourself, let me pause and evaluate whether that story that I'm telling myself is actually the truth, because it's probably not. What we are is not bad goal writers, but we are professionals who've been given one very narrow way of goal writing and one very broken system and very little support. And we've been kind of pushed out into the world and said, write the goals and write them all and do it as soon as possible, right? Stay here until you get it done. And so we sit there like racking our brains, typing, deleting, staring at the blank page on, your Google sheet, just thinking, oh my God, I can't do this again. And the reason is not that you're a bad goal writer. And this is the mindset shift that I want you to walk away with. It's that we are trying to force our autistic students' communication goals into a box that doesn't actually reflect progress for them. If we make a goal for an autistic child that they will request something with 80% accuracy, let's just think about what that might look like in practice. So if I made a goal that said, Johnny will make a request with 80% accuracy, what am I going to be thinking about when I go into my session? I'm going to be thinking about, how can I get Johnny to request? How can I engineer the environment so that he has the opportunities to request? And while I'm not saying that we shouldn't be thinking about enhancing our environments to support communication, when we start contriving trials of communication, that's where it loses its communication. That's where it no longer becomes communication for me. And that, to me, is why things don't generalize. It's one of the reasons, at least, is because when we set up these adult-directed, very highly contrived situations or trials for kids, and we present them with these very narrow opportunities to communicate, maybe they do it in those particular situations, but then we wonder, okay, well, why are they not doing it outside of my sessions? Why aren't they doing it when they go home? Well, it's because we've put way too much of our hands into it, and we didn't let the child actually learn the skill because it was valuable or meaningful for them. We made them do the skill. So it's not actually something that, they saw value in. And I'm not saying that we can't have structure and we can't offer supports and scaffolds. I believe we can. And I don't think those things are, outside of a child-led approach. I don't think that structure and being child-led are mutually exclusive. I think that they can work really nicely in unison. And so I want us to be thinking about that idea that we're not bad goal writers. We're just not using the right tools for our goals. And so that's the second mindset shift. So the first one was that things can be easy. The second one was that we're not bad goal writers, but we are in a system that doesn't give us a lot of tools. Now, the third mindset shift is one that I feel like I've always been pretty good at. But in talking to so many of you and just, working with other educators and clinicians over the years, I know that it's very much not common, maybe. I think it definitely depends on your personality type, and it depends on your comfort level when it comes to potential confrontation or, discomfort and being able to speak up and speak out. And I'm not saying I've always been great at this, and there are still ways that I could improve, but as an ADHDer who's very passionate about the things that I'm passionate about, I sometimes talk before I even have a chance to worry about what the other person's going to think or say. And so that has both helped and hurt me in many ways, both personally and professionally in my life. But one of the things that I'm thankful for when it comes to that is the fact that I'm always willing to question things. I think that it's easy for us, and it's very common and expected for us to just accept what we've been taught as the truth and accept the rules that we've been told, whether at your school or in your setting. Like, the things that you've been told are the rules. We've been taught to just accept them, right? Just to work within them or work around them, but they can't change. But my mentality and my personality is to go, why? Why not? Because if that rule doesn't make sense to me, and it doesn't seem to be serving me or my students or anybody for that matter, I'm going to question it. And I know that that comes down to me being a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit avoidant, a little bit demand avoidant. I don't want you telling me what to do if it's not something that's going to benefit me, and I will question what I'm told to do. And it's not to be confrontational, it's to really understand. And so over the years, I've tried to work on my delivery and my tone, because when you go in blazing and you go in hot and you're not, taking into consideration the other people's perspective, then, that's not something that usually works, right? But over the years, I've kind of softened my delivery and I go in with more curiosity rather than rage. Like I used to go into situations just immediately like, no, we're not doing that. And it was fueled by wanting to advocate, but it was coming across as very argumentative or very aggressive. And so I've toned it down to some extent. I could still get there easily. But I know now that you can come to a better solution when you go in with curiosity and you go in without pointing the finger and with a more collaborative spirit. And so now when a rule comes up or something's always been done this way, and so everybody's just doing it and I'm questioning it, I will say the thing still. I will say, well, I wonder why we do things like that. And then I might even say something if I'm feeling extra spicy. I might even say something like, yeah, but sometimes the things we've always done are the things that need to change most. Like sometimes those are the things that are getting in our own way. And I just like to sprinkle that in and see how people respond. I mean, I am human, so I don't always have the confidence or the nerve to say this. It definitely depends on the other person and who they are and how comfortable I feel with them. But the mindset shift here is to remind yourself that you can question what you've been taught. You can question not only just the things that we learned in school, but the things that other people are telling you in your job. You can question what your supervisor tells you to do. You can question what the administration of your school tells you to do. You can question anybody for all I'm concerned, as long as it's aligned with your values and you are speaking your truth and you're doing what feels most, aligned with your goals, which maybe they're to advocate for your students or to protect your mental health or, all the above and then some. I think that it's more than okay to question the status quo and try things differently. Now, the reason I'm bringing this third and final mindset shift up is because so many people have messaged me and said, I really want to try rubrics, but I just feel like my admin is not going to get it. And they're going to say, no, you have to choose a goal from our goal bank, or you have to write a goal in this particular, way. And so usually my response is, listen, here's how you can explain it. And I will, I go into that a little bit in the framework, but I definitely talk about this with my members all the time. And I think it's really important to think about and consider, which is like, how are you going to respond if a supervisor or an administrator says, well, we never did things like that, so we're not doing that. Or, that's not how we do things. How are you going to respond? Because it's easy to freeze and just go, I'm not allowed to write rubric goals. But that's not true, because IEPs and, goals in general in our field are to be individualized, right? It's literally in the word or in the acronym. But even in a setting maybe that bills insurance or, uses different funding, our goals need to be aligned with what the client or student needs, not what admin has decided was the easiest or best way to write goals. And so I always encourage anybody who asks me about this to pause and practice it in your car, practice it in your mirror, in your shower. Like, what am I going to say if somebody says that to me? And 9 out of 10 times, that's not going to happen. I would say most of my members in the Child-Led Collective who have started using rubrics and have shown them to their supervisors and admin have had really positive feedback and have had coworkers start adopting the system as well. And, I think that most of the things we worry about don't actually come true, but let's say it does. I mean, I've definitely been questioned. What are you going to say to really reflect your goals, not only your rubrics, but your goals for why you're using rubrics? And how are you going to make sure that you have the confidence to defend them and stand up for yourself in those moments? And the mindset shift that I would love for all of you to really think about is the idea that you can question things and you can do things the way that you feel in your clinical judgment with your, research and your experience. You can do things that align with your values and your insight and your knowledge, even if they're not popular, even if they're new and people are like, I don't know, I don't like change, I don't want to do things like that. It's okay. You have the strength to do it. You have the courage to do it. And so many people are doing it now, not to peer pressure you, but so many of us are finding new ways to support autistic students in systems that weren't designed for them or for us. And it's very liberating to do things in a way that truly fulfills our own goals, our own plans, and that also keeps us within our own value system. Because when we're at work for, 40 hours a week, if we're being asked to do things that don't align with our values, that kind of take us out of ourselves, then we're going to be exhausted. We're going to feel like what we're doing doesn't matter. And we're going to go home and feel like we dread work. And we don't dread work. We love our students. We love working with the kids. What we dread is the system that doesn't support us or our kids. And every time we do something different, like writing a rubric-based goal or questioning a rule that everybody just follows because that's how we've always done things, we get closer to living and working within our own values and staying in that alignment. And that to me is the best antidote to burnout and the best way to support ourselves no matter what this career throws at us. I hope this episode was helpful. I hope that you are starting to consider rubric goals. I am going to put the quick start to rubrics in the show notes. That's a free download that you can kind of use to read more about the system and decide whether it's something you might want to use with your students or your clients. If you found this episode helpful, send it to a friend, leave a review. Your reviews help me so much to keep going. This is a one-woman show, so I'm the one recording it. I'm the one doing most of the editing and coming up with the topics and the scripts. And usually there's no script, but coming up with what I plan to say, whether I say it or not is another story. And so seeing your kind reviews is so meaningful to me, and it's what really inspires me to keep going even when it's hard. So thank you for that. And don't forget to join the email list by downloading the freebie or going to the website so that you can hear about our upcoming workshops. We've got another rubric workshop coming your way, as well as many others that I think are going to help you align your work with your values and manage everything that's on your plate in a way that doesn't lead you to burnout. Thanks for being here, and I will talk to you soon.